meeting tonight. Basically, I'm very pleased to see that there is such an interest, and the committee here tonight is going to conduct its regular meeting. The meeting lasts approximately an hour and a half. But since we have a lot of new members here, I'm just going to give you a brief history of where we have come. We started out in the fall by asking for volunteers to our newsletter, and a lot of people responded. Some started, some had other commitments, and they couldn't ask to be let off the committee, and that was fine. And this is what we have ended up with, a committee that has been with us for almost all of the meetings that we've had, and I congratulate them and I thank them for showing such an interest in working with us. Basically, we started out by visiting all the different sites of the school so that we could see what condition our facilities were in. Then we came back and we had several meetings where we talked about the observations that we saw, some of the concerns that we had, the history of the school district, the geographical center of the district, transportation, and we discussed various options. The other thing that we did is we verified through the state that we were able to extend the reorganization aid so that if we were going to build within the next 2 years, that we would be able to get the 95% state aid, and that was a very important thing for us. In addition to that, we sought to look at our enrollment projections, because if we are going to do anything in building, we need to have accurate enrollment projections. I went to the board. The board passed a resolution allowing us to spend up to $2,000 to have an enrollment projection done for the district. You need to have this kind of information if you're going to do any kind of a facility study or building. After we had met several times, the committee decided that it was time now that we had some serious questions, that we needed to have some people come in and provide those answers for us. And that's when we contacted our engineers and our architects and asked them to come in. They volunteered to do so. Part of our second 5-year facility study is what we're seeing here tonight, because this is part of that study, which there is no cost to the district. The other thing that I do realize, because I've had a chance to talk to several residents, is that the committee here is working in a different light than what probably many of you in the audience are. So in order to try to equalize the playing field, because I know we all want to make a very informed decision, regardless of what the decision is, regardless of the option that we choose, I have contacted our transportation department, talked to the buildings and grounds supervisor, and on August 29th, we will have a bus to take anyone who wants to go on a building tour of Moores Elementary and Rouse's Point Elementary, since those are the two buildings that we are really talking about. And there will also be the one during the day will leave the district office area at 9, and it'll come back at 12. And then we're going to have another one in the evening, because I know a lot of people work and it may not be possible for them to go during the day. And that'll be at 5 p.m., returning at 8. We hope that if you really want to get some real data, that you would sign up. I have a sign-up sheet for the morning and for the afternoon to know what I would need for transportation. Or you may choose to drive your own vehicles. That would be up to you. But we will provide a bus so that we can provide that information for everyone. And then you will also have an idea as to what are some of the sites and the conditions that the committee has seen. Tonight, what our goal is to continue with the process that we have been working on. And what we're going to do is look at goals and criteria that we would establish before we would evaluate, assess, or even consider any of the options that we're going to look at. And Randy Collins and Ron are going to take us through this process. They're going to talk about some of the things that we should look at when we are assessing for construction. And then after that, they are going to, and they have some flats or they have some drawings that they're going to show with the options. Now, the intent is not to decide on any option tonight. The intent is to provide this information to our committee members, who will then have a couple weeks to go back with the criteria and the goals that we have looked at tonight to assess each of these options. And then when we come back on the 30th, we've asked Randy, when he comes back, the architects, when they come back, to provide a more in-depth look at each of these options and to provide cost factors. So that will be one of the prime considerations. That's the agenda, and our next meeting, if you want to come to that meeting also, will be on the 30th, when we will discuss what the committee has had a chance to review and look at. And then on September 5th, the committee will be making a presentation to the Board of Education at our Board of Education meeting. And again, I invite all of you to come to that meeting too. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Randy, and he's going to work with us on the goals.
What time are those meetings at?
The meeting on the 30th is at 6 o'clock, and the board meeting on the 5th is at 6:30. Thank you. We could do that. Want to start? We'll start at the end. Roy?
I'm Roy Howard from Rouse's Point.
Luke Wallet from Champlain.
Jack Ragoon from Orange.
Brendan Mars from Champlain.
Josie Gilroy, Rouse's Point.
Tom Bayshard from Rouse's Point.
Steve Novacek, Morris Forks.
Lynn Grobline, I live in Shady.
Dennis Rasco, Principal of Moore's Elementary.
Joe Schreiner, Ross's Point.
Bob Hebert from this point.
Orville Meadow, Morris.
Dan Dumas, Morris.
I'm Randy Collins, I live in Rotterdam.
I'm Ron Bavoli, Holland.
Okay. I have a microphone on, but I don't know if it's working. It says it's on. It's there, okay. I'll speak. All right, thank you. When we met 3 weeks ago, no, a little closer. Okay. Yes.
I had said that I am a resident of Chazy Town, but because I am a new build in the area, I am in pay taxes to the Northeastern School District.
Okay. When we met 3 weeks ago with the committee, which was our first time meeting with you, we talked about some of the important aspects of any facilities plan, facilities improvement plan. And we discussed what some of the goals might be. And so I thought that tonight we should start out by reviewing those, what we discussed last week, and seeing if you have any others that you would like to add to it. So I wrote down on this board, and from what we discussed last week, and I'd like to just review them. First is that the educational program needs should drive any of the design solutions. And each one of these is kind of a major topic, and there's subtopics that can be listed under each of them. But we talked last week under this subtopic, or under this main topic, would be that your current educational program grade configurations are K through 5 in elementary school, 6 through 8 for middle school, and 9 through 12 for high school. So any renovations and/or additions or new construction should support those programs. And the elementary could be further divided up between primary grades, K through 2, and intermediate grades, 3 through 5. Another sort of subtopic under this is that the State Education Department establishes minimum square footage requirements for classrooms and other types of spaces. And the goal would be to try to meet those minimum requirements. For example, there's a minimum size requirement for classrooms of 770 square feet and kindergarten classrooms of 900 square feet. When you get into high schools, some science labs are required to be 1,000 square feet, others are required to be 1,200 square feet. Gymnasiums, cafeterias have minimum size requirements. So we see that as a goal. It's not necessarily one we're going to meet in every case, but it's something that we strive for. We've, since the last meeting 3 weeks ago, we've walked through the buildings again and also met with middle school and high school principals talking about this facility. And a couple of other needs came up related to just educational program space. And one was just some lack of some classroom space, and it relates to the last one on here, which is additional storage space. Because what's happening in high school is that several rooms and areas are being used for storage because of the lack of storage, and therefore it's causing kind of a shortage of some of the classroom space. So providing additional storage space, if I could jump to the last one, will actually help to free up some classroom space right now. The second one was related to the cost. We talked about the overall cost as well as the tax impact. And the thing that has the biggest impact on taxes is how efficiently you can use the building aid. And so what I've said here is that we want to maximize the building aid and therefore would minimize the tax impact. Mr. Hebert mentioned that the State Education Department, or the legislature actually, has extended your reorganization aid of 95% for building aid through July 1st of 2008, or actually June 30th of 2008. What that means is if you do a building project and you have to pass a public vote, you have to award construction contracts before that date in order to qualify for that 95% aid. That's the guarantee. We don't know after that whether your 95% aid will be extended or not. It may be, it may not be. So we're looking at this as a window of time. And we discussed also last week that if you back up from that June 30th of 08 date in order to get signed construction contracts, we would really need to go out to the voters no later than, say, the end of January of 07. So between now and January of 07, some decisions need to be made if you want to take advantage of that 95% building aid. And the reason that it takes that long is because after a vote, if the vote were to be successful, then we would need to prepare final drawings and specifications. And that process for a larger project typically takes about 8 to 10 months. They get submitted to the State Education Department, and the State Education Department Facilities Planning Office reviews the plans and specs, and their review time currently is running in the 14 to 16 week time frame. So if we were to submit those drawings and specs, say in October or November of 07, we would expect approval by January or February of 08. And we don't want to go out to bid too much later than that with construction contracts, because that's the best time to get bids, is in the winter. And in the Northeast especially, when the construction doesn't come to a halt, but slows down pretty significantly in the winter months, and then it's pretty busy in the summer months. So if we were to bid it in, say, January or February of 08, receive bids, award contracts in the spring of 08, then we could sign contracts before the end of June. And construction most likely wouldn't start until school got out in June of 08. Then we look at a construction time frame, depending upon the scope of the work, that would probably go through 2 summers and be completed in September of 09. Okay, so it's about a 3-year process from now until the end of construction. And I got off on a tangent, but that's related to that, again, 95% building aid. We also discussed that in order to maximize building aid, there was a couple of rules that came into play, and these relate to how building aid is calculated by the state education department. Generally, renovation work to existing buildings is fully aidable, meaning that it qualifies for the 95% building aid. And new construction may or may not be fully aidable. It depends on the types of spaces that are included in that new construction. So aid is provided for spaces where students are instructed, whether it be general classrooms, science classrooms, gymnasiums, and cafeterias, for example, but non-aidable spaces, quote unquote, include office space, storage space, corridors, and so on. However, the aid that's provided for the classrooms and the aidable spaces is supposed to be enough to cover all the other ancillary spaces that go along with it. But it doesn't. In a new construction, a standalone new building, for example, even though you have a 95% building aid ratio, you're not going to get that full 95% aid on new construction. And that's primarily because the formulas that were developed in the 50s, and they haven't changed since. There's been some ways that they've adopted them to provide additional aid, but you still just don't get full aid for new buildings, standalone new buildings. Additions, if you plan it so that when you do an addition, you also renovate an existing space, and do an addition such that all of the spaces in the addition generate aid, then you maximize your aid. And we're going to show you some options that will make that a little clearer. So, main point is we try to maximize building aid in any design solution, and that's an important criteria. Addressing health and safety and code issues, equally important. I think taking care of what you've got is important. And there was a gentleman earlier, and we got into a discussion about the difference between capital expenditures and maintenance and operational expenditures. And it's an important difference. The reason school districts have capital construction projects for renovations, okay, is that that work can be bonded over time and it qualifies for building aid. It's not cost effective for a school district or school board to do major capital work as part of the budget because you just won't get the building aid that way. So the law is that in order to do capital construction and then bond it over time, whether it's renovation work or additions, new construction, is that one, it can't be maintenance work. It needs to be capital construction. Maintenance work does not qualify. So stripping of a floor and refinishing is maintenance. Cleaning is maintenance. Washing the windows. And I can go on and on. General routine maintenance to boilers and building systems. But replacement or major upgrades is considered capital expenditure, therefore can be bonded over time and qualify for building aid. So each district is required to do a building conditions survey every 5 years. And back in January, it was the deadline for this 5-year period, which goes from 2006 to 2010. And our firm and WPS, the consulting engineering company, did the building conditions survey. And that was the first half of our charge, which Bob alluded to earlier, for these 5-year facilities plan. The state then requires you to take that building conditions survey, which lists things that need to be replaced or upgraded in the existing facilities, and provide costs to that, and then look at, over the next 5 years, how much of that work may be accomplished. And the reason that the state has required that is because they want to be able to plan. There's 760 some school districts in the state, and they want to be able to plan and let the legislature know how much money are they going to have to spend on building it over the next 5 years. So the building condition survey addresses several of the needs related to health, safety, and code issues. And some of those things, for example, we found that the basements, where there's classrooms in the basements of Moore's and Rouse's Point, really don't meet code requirements that exist for new construction. The amount of fresh air and natural light is less than what you would have in new construction. And in fact, less than what you have in the first and second floors of those buildings. So one goal may be to move the students out of the basements of those buildings. You need to tell us whether that should be a goal or not, but it's one that you should consider. The reason that you're able to have students in there now is because there are still two means of egress out of that basement. And because it's an older building, the code requires them to be, or allows them to be grandfathered. So they're grandfathered because when they were constructed, they met the codes at that time. So in the 30s, when Rouse's Point was built, another example is that the classroom sizes are about 660 or 680 square feet, and that was the standard then. The standard minimum standard now is 770. We're finding that 820 to 830 is pretty standard for classrooms in elementary school. Okay. Again, other health and safety. ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, that was established, I believe, in 1990, was adopted by the New York State Code. And those accessibility guidelines should be addressed as part of any capital construction project. So elevators, where they're not currently placed, should be installed. Entrances should become accessible to the handicapped. Bathrooms, especially public bathrooms, should be accessible. Doors into classrooms need to be accessible, and so on. So we looked at those types of things. Air quality is also a big issue related to code. When older buildings were constructed, older school buildings, and it's both the 30s vintage and the 50s and 60s vintages, when most of the school buildings that we're in today, or that exist today, were built during those times to take care of the baby boom population in the 50s and 60s. And previously, the WPA projects that were done in the 30s were built. The amount of air changes per hour, the amount of fresh air generated through the school, is 3 times now what it was per code in the 50s and 60s. So it's not uncommon for existing school buildings to be experiencing air quality type problems because there's not enough fresh air going through mechanically. So it's not uncommon in a major capital project to install new ductwork and provide fresh air. It provides for healthier environments in school. The last thing on the list under this is that it's important to upgrade systems. PA systems, fire alarm systems, and certainly heating, ventilating, in some cases air conditioning systems, electrical, and so on. And we've listed various specific things that we feel should be done within the next 5 years in the building condition survey. The next thing we talked about last week was there's a debt limit. And at that time, we didn't know what the debt limit was. Since Bob has been in touch with the fiscal advisor and has determined that $29 million is the debt limit. And while you don't have to stay within that, I think it's advisable to stay within that because those limits are set for reasons. It is possible to go above it, but you need a 60% yes vote in order to exceed that limit. That's the law. Reducing operational costs was another thing that we discussed. And I think energy and energy use is one issue. Maintenance costs, both of the buildings as well as your buses and other vehicles and grounds. Replacement costs, by using durable materials that last a long time, you may pay a little bit more up front, but they last longer, so you're not replacing them as often. And then there's the issue of staffing and human resources that needs to be considered in any change in your current situation. The next topic we discussed was energy efficiency and sustainability. One of the things that our engineers discovered or was told by talking to your utility company was that they would be willing to bring gas to this campus. at no cost to bring the gas here. And gas is a more efficient fuel with modern heating equipment than oil. So I don't know the exact dollar amount, but there would be a savings incurred through fuel efficiency if you switch to gas where it could become available. And then just energy efficiency, if we were to replace a roof, we would no doubt put back more insulation than might exist now to at least meet the New York State Energy Code and sometimes exceed it. In the Northeast, we found that the right amount or even an increased amount of insulation, improving your building envelope is one of the best ways to save energy. The other thing is use of natural light into as many spaces as we can get. And looking at reducing the usage of natural resources through various means. Water is one large natural resource that we want to look to reduce usage. And we already talked about the last one. So these were things we reviewed last time. I'd just like to open it up for discussion amongst the committee. If there's other things that you'd like to add to this list or for us to consider.
I'm curious when we say in general, renovations are fun. What are, I don't like generality.
Okay, what I meant when I said that is renovation work is fully aidable as long as you stay within the maximum cost allowance. Okay. And we did discuss this last week as well, or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
And the maximum cost allowance is calculated based upon what the student capacity of the school is. And there's a formula. And so when you do renovation work, we know what that maximum cost allowance is. And I'll use Rouse's point as an example for right now. The capacity of that existing school is approximately 200 students. And at elementary schools, the maximum cost allowance is determined by taking the number of student capacity and multiplying that times the number per student, which in elementary schools is approximately between $10,000 and $11,000. So you end up with a maximum cost allowance for renovations to that building of somewhere between $2 and $2.5 million. So if you spend less than that on renovations, then you're going to get your full 95% aid. Okay? If you spend more than that maximum cost allowance, then everything up to that is aidable at 95%. Anything over that, the district pays 100% of that cost. Okay? Okay, any other questions or comments, feedback?
What determines the maximum student capacity?
The student capacity for elementary schools is based on 27 what's called building aid units per regular classroom. Regular meaning regular ed students. For special ed classrooms, it's determined based upon the number of special ed students. There's 811 special ed classrooms, there's 1211, and then there's 15-1 classrooms. So the State Education Department has on file for every building in the state what the student capacity is for the existing building. If you do substantial changes to the existing building, then that has to be recalculated. If you don't do any changes to it, they're going to basically calculate it based on what they have on the books. One of the things that we'll do between now and the 30th is to show you what the maximum cost allowance is for each of your schools. And then when we do some preliminary cost estimates for construction, we'll compare that. And we'll show you whether or not you're going to exceed or not exceed the maximum cost allowance. So those allowances are determined for existing buildings, and then they're also determined for new construction in the same way. Classrooms generate a certain amount. So I gave you one example. The elementary schools, 27 building aid units per classroom. and less for special ed classrooms. And then certain spaces also generate some aid, gymnasiums, cafeterias, for example. When you do high schools, there's a different formula for high schools. And it's kind of complicated, but it's very similar. It's 30 building aid units per classroom for regular classrooms. It's 24 for science labs. Each gym station is worth 30 building aid units. So you add those all up, and then there's another little formula that you have to apply to it, and then multiply it times a certain amount per student. For a high school and middle school, or secondary kids, 7 through 12, the amount per student, per building aid unit, is actually more than it is for elementary. That's because for high schools, you usually have larger spaces, and more spaces per student. So recognizing that they allow more aid per student and per building aid unit. Okay. Anything else?
I think we have on our list, I don't know if some people want to consider it, but we had talked about defining the district. We had looked at that very closely,
Okay.
and I didn't know if some people on the committee wanted that considered or not.
I'm filming in on exactly what you mean by that. When you say defining the district?
As far as choosing what our options would be, some people had considered, we had looked quite in depth on where the district, center of the district,
Okay.
as far as population.
Okay.
We were talking about the bus lines.
Thank you. Transportation and length of transportation and so on is one of the criteria, yes.
Frank, I think we also need to clarify when we talk about the debt limit, that's the amount that we have left in debt.
Correct.
Not the total debt limit.
Right.
All the other debts that we incurred, whether it be bus bond issue or previous bond issues, then all that's subtracted from that. I think it's around 41, but we have 29.
Correct. Right. That's the the 29 million is the remaining debt limit. And that's an approximate, because that could change, and it's what the debt limit is when you actually do define borrowing is the thing. But so that may go up or down slightly, but we know we need to try to stay, very close or less than that amount. Yeah, so the transportation was,
Our debt right now, we owe now about 8-9 million already in debt.
I think with the bus bond bills like that, I think it's around about,
I think it's a little more than the nine. I don't have the exact number, but we've told us.
I think that's what we're going to spend.
okay.
If you do renovations in
Yes.
an older building,
Yes.
do you lose all that was grandfathered in, exemption?
That's a good question, and the answer to that is that if you spend more than 50% of the replacement cost, then you have to bring the entire building up to current code. That's the short answer. There's a little more than that, because regarding compliance with ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, you're out of compliance in, well, really one school from Rouse's Point, because there's no elevator and there's no way to get a handicapped person in and up to every level. So the ADA guidelines are that you have to spend up to 20% of the cost of renovations to meet ADA guidelines. So if you were to spend $2 million on Rouse's Point, about what's that called, 400,000, up to 400,000 would have to be spent to bring it up to the accessibility guidelines. And then there's priorities of different accessibility things. And I mentioned them earlier. Getting in the front door is a priority. Having a place to park is a priority. bathrooms. And then being able to get to the various levels, so again, an elevator comes into play. And then for students and/or teachers, and we're not just talking about the public, but students and teachers, being able to get into classrooms and into accessible spaces is important. So, and then the other piece is that even though you may not spend 50% of the replacement cost on a building, there are things that are important, air quality, for example. And having students in basement spaces where there's maybe one small window up high, so there's an issue of equity, you know, so that each of the classrooms has the same amount of natural light and the same amount of natural ventilation to consider. So those are things. State ed really encourages you to deal with the types of things that I talked about earlier regarding health and safety and code requirements. So I think I answered your question.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You talked about Rouse's Point renovation at 95% to about 2.5 million.
Yeah. Don't hold me to that exactly.
Well, just pretend.
Yeah.
Suppose we found $4.5 million worth of stuff needed to be done.
Yes.
What would happen?
Well, you'd have a couple of choices. You could say, we're just going to spend up to the maximum cost line and do what we can for that. And then you're done. Or you could decide to spend more and you would just incur additional costs that wouldn't be aided. So it would have an impact on the taxes. I mean, it would have a greater impact on the taxes.
That's not state aid.
That's what I mean. It's not aided. Right, over that. Exactly.
But there might be some requirements, if it was 2.25, there might be some requirements of things that have to be done based on what we've already talked about. So we may not get as far as we'd like to go with that 2.25 in terms of ADA and other kinds of things.
So there's another way around it, and and that is that you have another bond vote. Because so you could do up to your maximum cost allowance, and then after that construction project is completed, you could have another vote and do another project, again up to the maximum cost allowance. There's a problem with that too, and I'm just saying, the current law is that way. However, it's being considered, several districts have taken advantage of that loophole, if you will, and they've done many projects and gotten the maximum cost allowance every time. State ed, there's a bill in the legislature, actually, I don't know if it's an actual bill or if it's actually become approved by the legislature, but SED isn't enforcing it yet. But they're talking about enforcing it, and that is that districts I think they're talking about either every 10 or 15 years have to stay within that maximum cost allowance. Yeah, so that instead of coming back in 2 years and then having the whole maximum cost allowance again, they have to wait. So right now it's still up in the air. And Colonel Thurneau, who's the head of facilities planning, talked with him about that. I mean, they're getting pressure from the legislature in order to cut costs, in order to implement that. They just haven't done it yet.
So districts have had some success by going out 1 year for, say, the 225, and then coming back in a year or two.
Yes, and like I said, that's why this rule is being implemented, because they're feeling that it's getting taken advantage of.
Even in those 2 or 3 phase building referendums, basically it's all done in one referendum.
Well, yeah, you can't take a project under one referendum and do it in 2 or 3 phases and get the maximum cost allowance 2 or 3 times. No, it has to be a separate referendum.
You have to go back next time.
Okay. We were going to try to keep the meeting to an hour and a half, and I think we're on target. If there's no more on this topic, then I'd like to move on to the next topic, which is we've developed what we call a space program. And space programs are really important to have prior to doing design work. And we came up with these based upon state education department guidelines, and also based on discussions that we've had with the superintendent and two of the principals in the district. And they're a draft right now. They're not cast in stone. But we think they're relatively close. And I'm going to ask Ron to go through these with you. You have a handout.
Let me see if one more works. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. There's a series of sheets here, and the first one is a program outline for 2D elementary school, which is what Rouse's Point is. And so what we've done prior to looking at any kind of options for adding to it is determine what spaces, according to SED guidelines and other commonly accepted practices, what spaces would we need in a 2D school, and how big should those spaces be? So starting with the list of the classrooms for a 2D school would be 2 kindergarten rooms, 2 classrooms each for grades 1 through 5, so that's 10, special ed room and related special ed spaces. That's multiplied out to the column on the far right for the total square footage. After that, music, an art room, and storage to go with those. Computer classroom, media center, and for a 2D school, 1 station gym. The next big area is the administration support areas, listing of all the different offices and rooms that would be required. Following that is the nurses suite, cafeteria, which would be a combination cafeteria auditorium with a kitchen serving area. Then that subtotals all the educational program spaces. And underneath that, we don't list each of the mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, data closets, but there's a multiplier to arrive at a square footage that would be normal for that amount of space. And that's all totaled up at the end. So for a 2D school, a typical 2D school would be 40,000 square feet.
What 2D means is 2 classrooms per grade level. Okay?
I think the other clarification is that media center for the library.
Library.
And I'd just like to go back to one point in terms of debt service and looking through the notes, and I know where Jack got that number, because that was the information that we had given, but that did not include the bus spot. So that's where that 8 million comes from, Jack.
Any questions on that, that first program?
Just the last, what net to gross?
Net to gross includes, that's a good question, that includes the thickness of the building walls, it includes the hallways,
Mechanical, electrical spaces.
yeah, anything that's not spelled out above, but that still is part of the building, is included in that amount.
And what's the size of the building now?
The existing Rouse's Point School, including the basement, is, I believe it's around 36,000 square feet.
The difference between what exists and what we're calculating is that the classrooms are smaller than what we calculate based on SED minimums.
Most of the classrooms at Rouse's Point are 660, 680 square feet. The next sheet is for 3D, which is what Morris is. And again, it's a very similar list, increasing the numbers of classrooms, still a music room and art room, technology, slightly bigger library, a 2-station gym. The other areas are very similar.
cafeteria is slightly larger. When it comes to gymnasiums, when you have up to 500 student capacity, you're supposed to be able to get by with a one-station gym. In reality, it doesn't work. Once you get beyond a three-deep school or more, you really need 2 phys ed stations in order to accommodate it. And it's based on the numbers of classrooms. 14, you get more than 14 classrooms, then you require a second gym station. So that's the difference between a 2-deep and a 3-deep school. Right now, Morris does have 2 stations. Right. So the total for that building, that program comes out to 56,000 square feet. The existing Moores, in this case, not counting the basement, because very little of it is being used educationally, it's 52,000, so slightly under.
And this 36,000 at Ross's Point included the basement classroom?
Including the basement, because they're using most of the basement right now. If you were to take out the basement, it would be 25,000. The first and second floors are 25,000. The next page is a program for 5-deep elementary school, which would be the size if you were to combine those populations. And I won't go through each space. They're the ones you would expect, like the library and the cafeteria, are proportionally larger. The total there comes out to 82,700 square feet. Now, the other thing, down underneath those totals, you see, for example, at the 2D, 134 square feet per student. That's if you divide the number of students, which is 300 for 2D. That's the amount per student of space that there is. And you can see that there is a little bit of an efficiency gain when you get to the larger schools.
It's only 10 square feet.
The primary reason is that you still, with a 5-deep school, you can use a 2-station gym. Because you'd have to get over 28 classrooms, over, let's see, 30. We might need to have 30 stations in this. That's what you do for over 28. Yeah, it's getting close. We should look at that. We might need to add a 3rd gym station to this one, which would increase that 82,000 square feet. Because for 28 classrooms, we need 2 stations. Get over 28, we have 30 basically. So, right. So I think we're going to have to increase this one to a 3D. We'll come back on that.
You said more, Ross's Point had 200 people.
That's the actual capacity of a 2D school. Like you say, student capacity based on 27 students per, is around 300 students.
More than 500.
450.
And the new setup is
750. Right. Now, okay. We're done. I think in the middle high school.
Then we also have a draft program for the middle high school, because one of the options we'll be looking at impacts the spaces there, and there are also some space requests that we've heard. This one's a little more complicated. There are more spaces. Starting with the high school classrooms, English, social studies, math, foreign language, science rooms, middle school classrooms. What we have listed for special ed has not been reviewed. Those are probably not correct, and those will need to be revised. one thing that doesn't exist in the school right now is a general classroom community. So we put that in the program. We list the art rooms, technology rooms, media center, cafeteria. Another space that's not existing in the middle high school is a large group instruction room. Right now, there's a problem with testing for large groups or regions. There's not enough space to do that. We list the gymnasiums, the pool, the auditorium. And on the next page, the administration and support areas. In a lot of cases, we're listing rooms that don't exist in the school right now. The nurses' suite, district offices, and again, subtotal for that, a multiplier for all the building service areas. And we come out to 196,760. And the existing middle high school is 181,000.
So there's a caveat here. These are preliminary, again, based on some assumptions. They need to be, I think, reviewed. And programs, we don't always meet everything that we put down. This is kind of a start. It's a starting. Because especially when we're dealing with existing buildings, you just can't meet every requirement perfectly. But when we look at what the existing buildings and how they compare to what state ed minimum requirements are, they're all pretty close. Which, I think is a good thing, based on your enrollments. And that's the other piece, is that the enrollment projections will be coming to us, we hope, by the end of this month. So we hope by the 30th that we'll have the enrollment projections. And the reason that those are important is because, again, it relates to the aid. We can't, if we're going to build new construction, we can't build more space than the enrollments justify, right? Or it won't be eligible for aid. And this is another important rule that SED has, and that is that they allow you to project out 5 years for elementary school students, 8 years for middle school students, and 10 years for high school students. So we'll be getting enrollment projections for 10 years, and we'll need to look at those and see how those look, match the capacity of the buildings.
I did see what Dr. Martin said, and he said,
Okay, great. Okay, so any other discussion on these space programs? Okay. The third topic on tonight's agenda is to review 4 options. And I have to say this, and I'm going to say it more than once, they're all preliminary. These are based on about the last week and a half for us working. Ron and I have been working together on it. Ron primarily is the design architect for this. So these are concepts, and that's all they are right now. They're floor plans, and in some cases, site plans. And so I've passed out these, and I'm going to talk from these boards. And you guys are going to have a tough time seeing them, but if you want to move down front, you're certainly welcome to. If you want to wait a few minutes if you'd like to move down front. Otherwise, they'll be here afterwards, and I think we're going to keep them in the library.
We want to keep them in the library so that people can come and take a look at it, especially if any of the committee members want to come and take a closer look before they, kind of look at the criteria established tonight. So they should be available.
Okay. And had I realized there'd be this many folks, I would have put this on PowerPoint. So next time we'll do PowerPoint so there's a big screen and everybody can see it. Okay. This option number 1. Well, let me review. There's 4 options that we were asked to take a look at. Option number 1 keeps Rouse's Point, Moores Elementary, and the current middle high school open. Option number 2 closes Rouse's Point and puts all of the elementary students at the Moores site and keeps the middle and high school students at this site. Option 3 has a 3A and 3B. Option 3 closes Moores and Rouse's Point and puts all of the students on this campus. 3A creates a new standalone elementary school. 3B creates an addition to accommodate, in addition to the middle school, to accommodate the elementary school students. Those are 4 options. They may not be all of the options, but they're the ones that you would ask us to look at for this meeting. So, option 1, this is a drawing that shows Moores Elementary on one side and Rouse's Point on the other. And Moores, and then the yellow indicates existing construction, and the blue indicates an addition. We made an assumption in both of these schemes that you would like to move the students out of the basement space. You may decide that that's not what you want to do in the end, but I can tell you that it would be recommended that you do that. So based on that assumption, we're showing a 3-classroom addition at Moores. And essentially there's 3 rooms right now in the basement. They would be converted into storage space, which is needed. You could build storage space, keep the kids in the basement, but you wouldn't get aided in the storage space. So why not build classrooms and get aided on it and make storage in the basement? And we said that these would be first grade classrooms. In general, what we've done is we've kept the primary level students, kindergarten, first and second grades, on the first level, and the intermediate level, third, fourth, and fifth graders, in this case, fourth and fifth graders, on the upper level. So the younger students don't have to walk up the stairs as much. With the exception of the media center on the second floor, all of the core facilities are located in the first floor. This maintains the existing gymnasium, the existing cafeteria, and existing main entrance. At Rouse's Point, there's actually 5 rooms that are being used in the basement right now. There's 4 classrooms and library, and then there's 1 storage room. So there's 6 spaces down there. So we're suggesting that you consider an addition to Rouse's Point, which would have 5 additional classrooms. We're also suggesting cafeteria. And again, that's not cast in stone. But you have 1 core facility right now that's being used for 3 uses. It's being used as a gym, cafeteria, and an auditorium. Since the existing gymnasium has a stage, why not keep it as a gym and auditorium and then add a cafeteria?
But could it be switched? Could it go the opposite way? The reason for I'm asking is the gymnasium is used for youth basketball and programs and stuff. And the way it is right now, there's no room for parents or anything.
True.
In Moores, they have a cafeteria.
Yes.
Okay. And then the gym is separate. Could it be the same?
It could, and that's, equity is another issue that we didn't discuss, but you may want it to be one of your goals, that each of the students in any building have equality in terms of their educational spaces. And it is more common to have, we've listed in our program, a cafetorium and a gymnasium versus a gymatorium and a cafeteria. So, yes, that could be done. The trade-off there is that you would have to build a larger space for a gymnasium than you would for a cafeteria. And the existing gym does meet the requirement in terms of the amount of space that you need for a phys ed station. But, yes, you could do that. Now, you might ask, why is this building so far away and why is there this long connection between the two? There's a good answer to that. Because there's classroom spaces on this side, and you need to have 30 feet between the exterior wall, where there's windows, from any other structure. We had to build this we'd have to design an addition that was 30 feet away. We also would envision this as being on grade, so that you would provide handicap accessibility and create a new entrance at this point into that new addition. And then ramp up to the first floor level of the existing building in this corridor. And then within that building, then provide an elevator to get to the second floor. So that's how we would, propose that the building be made accessible. So the addition does play a couple different roles. It provides that additional space for a second floor facility and also classrooms out of the basement, and provides for handicap accessibility. We're not going to talk about cost tonight because we don't have them yet. We just don't have them yet. And we also don't have the information related to the aid, but we will have that on the 30th. So what's important tonight is to provide feedback on the design and on the functionality of this diagram. Okay? So let's question.
On the Moore's 3 rooms addition, what is the elevation of those?
Those would
The
be,
handicap accessible to the ground level, on that section that
Right.
is elevated currently?
They would be at the first floor level of the school.
Right.
There would be a ramp outside to get to that level. So it would be handicap accessible.
there's really no room to add it on this one over here. But Moore's does have an elevator already, and it is accessible at each level, so from the inside you can get to here. Yes, you need a ramp on the outside.
Where's the ramp going to
Uh,
go?
right here. That is a detail that needs to be figured out because these are pretty conceptual, but right there. Okay, any other comments, questions?
In Ross's point, you talked about an elevator for accessibility in the existing structure. What would be a logical place to put
Right off the gym, right here. If you look at the second floor, we show a little square there, but basically that room, which is right up the gymnasium, and it's onto this corridor.
That would also let you get handicap accessibility from the stage to the lower level.
You got three, right, you have 3 levels, stage, gym level, which is the lowest, and the stage, which is the same as the corridor, and the upper floor.
Cost point you're gaining because the elevations are.
Right.
It's going up.
Right,
So you're gonna gain a bit there.
that's true, because of the grade. So that's the other thing, we walk the sites, but we don't have accurate site plans with topography on them yet, so that's,
Bill said that we would give you the property.
okay, good, that's, one of the things I will say, Russell's point, is that I believe it was, how many, it's 5 acres, the site, or is it more than that? 8, okay, okay, then we're in good shape. State Ed says that site sizes will be, for an elementary school, 3 acres plus 1 acre per 100 students. So for a 200-student school, we need a minimum of 5 acres. So we wouldn't need a variance to add on to this facility. And same with Moore's, we're well within, in fact, all 3 of the sites were well within the requirements for the minimum site sizes. And I think this is an aerial photograph that's kind of blurred because it came from a satellite image, again, because we don't have a survey of the site. But this is, you can see the road, and I should have said that earlier, but I think you get it. There's the circle. Playground's to this side. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
Will the current septic system that is installed at this time, will it facilitate to the addition with more students?
I don't know, but I can let you know. Well, the addition isn't really accommodating more students. So I think the short answer is it should be okay. But our engineer isn't here right now, so I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out. We aren't increasing the capacity of this school. We're just simply taking the students out of the basement and putting them into space at grade. We are adding the core facility, so in some ways we're increasing the capacity in that way, but
Just in case in the future the population is increased.
Yeah. You are building in some increase because the actual rated capacity of this is close, as a two-deep school, when you base it on 27 students per classroom, is higher. Your functional capacity is less because your classroom sizes are less, right? I think you said, what you said, 23?
23
In primary, and 25 in intermediate, or is that secondary? Intermediate, okay. And as soon as you get over 23 students in one grade level, you need that second classroom, right? So you can accommodate 46 kids in a grade level with 2 classrooms, but you may only have 30 in any, right? So just by being a two-deep school, you are building in increased capacity already.
So these cost figures that we're going to talk about at the end of the month,
Yeah.
are they going to include the cost of repairs
Yes.
to these schools?
Yes.
Okay. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to put a nice addition on something that needs a lot of money.
Absolutely. We'll have that information next time,
And
and cost of new construction.
we had spoke at a previous meeting that Mr. Menard had spoken to us about the septic system in Morris, that,
In Moore's, right?
yes,
Yes.
they had problems in the winter.
I know that that's an issue, and that's something that needs to be addressed as part of the renovations. Your question was related to Rouse's Point, correct, or was it Moore's?
Morris.
Moore's, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
I apologize, I'm also on the committee too,
That's
so
okay.
I'm not.
Moore, I know that the Moore septic system has some problems, and our engineers are familiar with it, and we will address that in the next meeting. Okay, any other questions on this option? Okay. The second option provides for a larger addition at Moore's in order to accommodate all of the elementary students in one location. And what we've shown again here, Moore's, the existing building is in yellow and the new construction is in blue. I'll start with the site plan, and we would provide a new, or propose a new bus drop-off area here, and then build an addition that goes out to the back and kind of creates a loop. Instead of having 2 dead ends, it ties in both ends of the existing school. And the way this plan is organized is that in the addition, in the existing building here, which is the newer addition, would be the kindergarten classrooms, first grade, and now you need 5 classrooms per grade level. So kindergarten, first grade, and second grade on the first floor, grades 3 through 5 on the second floor. And we've attempted to put as many aidable spaces in the addition so as to maximize the aided addition as possible. And you can see primarily classrooms, there's a library on the first floor, and almost all classrooms on the second floor. We would continue to use the existing gymnasium and the existing cafeteria in this option. And this is an option where the septic system most likely would need to be, the capacity would need to be increased. Because now we're not doubling the size, but we're, 2/3 again the size of the school.
Now, you mentioned that there might be a possibility, because of the numbers, that there might be 3 stations in the gym. Is there that empty space room up there?
Yeah, in fact, where it would go would be here. We might have to cock this up and put that there. When we come back next week, we'll address that and let you know for sure whether the 3rd gym station is required. If there was a 3rd gym station requirement, where would it go?
Where is the second one in this picture?
It's part of this gym. That gym is actually what's referred to as 2 PE stations. It's divided over. Yes. A phys ed station, a teaching station, is pretty small. It's half the size of that gymnasium. Again, that's minimum SED requirements. You may decide that you want more than, meeting the minimum requirement.
Well, if you're trying to put 2 classes in that gym, it's pretty darn small.
Okay? Good feedback. Maybe the thing to do would be to put the second gymnasium in that location. We looked at a scheme that showed that. And then in so doing, that would just slide this up a bit.
The cafeteria would be adequate as is for the additional 200 feet?
I think you would need to go to an additional shift for, and I also need to say that we haven't reviewed this with anybody yet. It's the first time, so,
And these are minimums
Yes.
we're talking about.
yes.
That cafeteria is, you can't get in there for Christmas, as it is.
Yes.
Now, I'm looking at your diagram on the right in this Moore building. I believe there was an outdoor basketball court where you've got the blue, where you got new spaces, and you've got, I assume this is your new driveway up there in the white.
Yes.
So you're taking, how much of the athletic fields are you taking away there? Is there-
Well, we are encroaching on it with this, and this, I didn't mention this, but this becomes a new bus entrance point here into the new construction. Again, one of the things that we really got to look at closer is how this impacts the site. We don't have a survey of the site. We were using overhead photographs that were, from our source anyway, fairly blurry. There is enough usable space on this site, not going across the road, I think there's 14 acres on the one side, that you can accommodate, actually you could accommodate up to 1,100 students with a 14-acre site for elementary. So, and most of this is usable or relatively flat land, but it may mean displacing some existing athletics fields to do that. And I would like to have some feedback from you on the community use of this site and whether or not, you know, this would impact that. I mean, I know in several districts we work for, there's, you know, little leagues and soccer clubs and so on that use fields that go beyond what you would use for phys ed.
It is used in the community for soccer. And they have a regular full-size field, and they have a couple smaller fields.
That wouldn't affect any of the field.
This wouldn't?
No,
Okay.
the only problem you got is most of this, according to my eyesight, looks like swamp. That's the problem, is that the field and all that.
Okay.
The way you have it now, you're not taking advantage of the soccer.
Right. From what we saw, the fields were over in this location, is that right?
Right.
Kind of,
The top section of that map,
We were told that that may have been designed to take a second floor. And that may be true, I don't know, I haven't confirmed that. The problem with building on top of that is, what do you do during construction with the space underneath? It's more work than can be accomplished in a 2-month summer construction period, so you have to do the work during school time. So in order to build on top of there, you would really need to, it'd be pretty disruptive. Now, having said that, the other thing we were thinking of is, if we build on top of there, we still need, I'll say at least a 1-story addition. It's really cheaper to build a 2-story new construction than it would be to build 1 story here and a story on top of there. So if you could get all the space you needed by building on top of this, I'd say it'd be worth considering. But because you can't, I think it's more cost effective to just do it all in one location.
But it might be an option for, if you go back to option 1, those 3 classrooms.
Right, that could be an option to build on top. Good point. Sure.
just thinking, so you're not going to mow that lawn.
Well, it's a good question, and in fact, what you need is to be able to get out of there. You've got a courtyard here in this facility, okay? And typically, in this area here, we would have double doors on both sides of the corridors, and it would allow you to bring, a hand mower through. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Option 3A. This is a smaller scale plan, but the colors in this case are a little bit different. This is the existing middle high school. The high school is in yellow, the middle school is in green. The maintenance facility is to the right. At the back of the site, the back corner here, there would be enough land to build a standalone elementary school. We did not actually show a floor plan of this facility, but this gives you an idea of what it might look like with its own entrance, bus drop-off, separating parent drop-off from that. I need to just tell you right up front that this option would probably provide the worst aid scenario because it's a new standalone building. And I know we discussed this at the last meeting, but shortly after, in just talking between Bob and I, we came up with the idea of 3B, which is an addition to the middle school. And as an addition, it becomes more aidable and much better from a tax impact standpoint. So let's just jump ahead for a minute to 3B, and that's the last option. I'm not saying that you should rule this out, but I think from a cost standpoint, it's going to be difficult. Yeah, that's a good point. There's wetlands down here. And again, because we don't have an accurate survey and mapping, one of the first things we need to do is map out the wetlands, and then we need to stay away, but I think there's a 100-foot buffer from wetlands where you can't build it. You can use it as athletic fields, play fields, but you can't build them. By eye, we thought this was pretty close to that buffer, but it really would need to be confirmed. The other thing that Bob was just referring to is that most likely this would require a full draft environmental impact statement, being new construction, close to wetlands and so on. The time frame involved with that really does throw you out of your time frame for a January vote, because it's probably a minimum of 6 months to go through a draft environmental impact study. So that's a second reason why this is not necessarily an attractive option. I mean, there are other, I think, programmatic reasons that this is a good option, but from a cost standpoint and from an environmental assessment standpoint, it becomes difficult. So option 3B creates an elementary school for all of the students in the district, so it means closing both Moores and Rouse's Point at the end of the existing middle school. And instead of building all new space for the elementary school, what we're proposing here, and here to the color coding, again, yellow is the high school, the light green is the existing middle school space. The light blue is existing space as well. Part of it's being used as middle school, part of it's being used as elementary right now. The dark green is new middle school space, and the dark blue is new elementary space. Now, we could have just added on all new elementary space and left the middle school where it is. But what we are showing here is that we're renovating existing space for those non-aidable types of spaces, as we discussed earlier, to improve the aid. And then building middle school classrooms and elementary classrooms so that we can maximize the amount of aid that we get out of an addition. I don't think it's still going to be fully aidable, quite honestly. I don't think so. We'll come back in 2 weeks and let you know what those numbers are. But the way this would work is we would provide a new entrance off of Prospect. And buses could come in, drop off, and continue on, and drop off then in front of the middle and high school. So that the elementary would have its own entrance at this location. We also need to deal with separating bus circulation, bus traffic from parent drop-off. This plan doesn't address that yet, but we're going to look at that for the next time. We discovered that in talking with the principal here. But one of the thoughts was that with a separate entrance to the back, that perhaps some parking and some parent drop-off could occur back here, get it away from the front where the buses are, just to separate that. But getting back to the plan, the other thing we found out was that some 2 additional middle school science labs are required right now, and that would free up some space for the high school, because the high school is lacking science space. So if we took 2 of the science labs from the science wing in the high school and put them into the middle school, and that would help take care of that problem in the high school. The elementary school has 2 wings that basically are each 2 stories high. On the first floor, again, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. On the second floor, 3rd through 5th grade. The first floor, when you walk in the entrance, you've got the principal and the nurse. And we're trying, in every design, to keep the principal's office near the main entrance. And it's really a security issue and one that improves the safety of the school. On that same note, we're suggesting that at the middle school entrance here, we move the district administration out of its current location and in its place put the middle school office, so that the middle school office is right next to the main entrance. In fact, there's a window when you come in the front door there on the left, and we could utilize that so that there's visibility for visitors. And then to the other side of the entrance, we would put, I flipped it around, sorry. Guidance on the left, the middle school office on the right. And then we move the district administration down the hall to where guidance is currently. Okay, there's a gymnasium and cafetorium here. Again, that was based on a 2-station gym. We may need to look at 3 stations. And its own cafetorium. This would be a serving cafeteria only. The cooking would continue to be done where you cook now. That's a good question, and I think we need to look at that more. But one possible area is out in front. And I think if doing that, you've got to think about safety. So perhaps an enclosure. I know that there's athletic fields in this location. The other thing that this potentially would do is move the maintenance facility down to where we showed the other elementary building. But that's not mandatory. That could stay where it is.
You're going to put an elevator in?
Yes, there will be an elevator in the new construction in order to get between the 2 floors. That would be required.
Current bus garage, you were to point to it on this map, where is it?
Right there. Right about there, I guess. This shows it here. You see it on the site. Okay.
If you put that addition on right there, we're going to lose a soccer field and a baseball field.
Correct.
The district would have to be committed to
Down below.
putting it in though.
Yep, and I think that would have to be relocated to where we're showing the elementary school here.
Down in the swamp.
Location. I've walked it. It's wet toward the back edge, but it's not. At least it wasn't wet when I walked it.
We also have cross-country trails running through there.
I understand that, so that's another consideration. This will require some additional study on the site, no question.
We really want to thank you for presenting these options to us now. I think the committee has information to digest, to look at. As I said before, all of these will be in the library. Any of the other information that we have is passed out to the committee members will have an opportunity to take a look at this information. If you want to call me, or if you need additional information, if you want to get a hold of Randy, if you want to get a hold of Randy, feel free to do so. And our next meeting is going to be here again, and again, you guys, the public is more than welcome, on the 30th, when hopefully then you will have much more information. So all the options are still open unless the committee would like at this time to eliminate one of the options, and if you want to default forward,
I think we don't need to eliminate anything.
okay, I was just thinking of the 3A versus the 3B, but we
Yeah,
still want.
well, that's an interesting,
I think we could still come back with costs for 3A so that you could see what the differences are between 3A and 3B. You brought up some good points about 3B. It does displace some athletic fields. So that's one of the disadvantages of that over 3A.
one of the downsides, what is this again, is this 3B or 3A?
This is 3B.
Is that it certainly eliminates any creativity or down on some creativity.
I beg to differ with you on that point.
Yeah?
But because, it doesn't. I mean, you still have, you create a new entrance. It does become attached to an existing structure, so it may, from a massing standpoint, need to fit in with the existing structure more so than if it were a standalone building.
Although I guess you could say, I don't know, you do this design and everything. But actually, having looked at some of the work you guys have done previously, it was creative, aesthetically, very pleasing. I guess you could do some of the same window kinds of things there.
I think that, I will say that about probably 80 to 90% of our work has been additions and renovations. And it's been primarily a result of the fact that most school buildings were constructed in the 50s and 60s, and they're still good buildings that can be reused and reused. And so, for the most part, districts aren't tearing those buildings down and building new. Where we've done new, it's been a result of either reorganization, like you're considering, or growth, enrollment growth, and new construction things.
I would also like to encourage anyone who wants to take the tour to please sign up so that we would know who would like to, because we will have those two tours on the 29th. So, as I said before, there's going to be one that's beginning at 9 o'clock, and then the second one for those who can't come during the day would be at 5 o'clock. So, if you're interested, the sign up is here. Yes, ma'am.
I didn't know, Mr. Hewitt, since there are 3 minutes left, if you would have time for one quick question. The issue that seems to be driving the timeline that you're working under, I'll just stand up, can everybody hear me? Yeah. Is this issue of reorganizational aid. And I wonder if the committee is clear on exactly what the situation is with that legislation. Because you and I had a discussion on that today, and you showed me a letter.
And I have shared that with the committee. I have told, I told them basically that it's sunlighted in June, and that it had been renewed every 2 years. But in my discussions with Maureen, she said, I can't guarantee to you that it will. But we were able to extend it for 2 more years, as I showed you. I even showed you the documentation that she sent me saying that it was extended. And I said, what will happen in 2 years? We cannot tell. So right now you have a sure thing that you will have it for 2 years. You may in the next 2 years, you may not. I guess you could say, you could look at the history and say it's been extended, but then you can also look at the history of the state aid. You can also look at the history of what Randy pointed out to us tonight, how the state has not increased their formulas in many years. So we don't know what's going to happen.
And I think one of the reasons that we would ask for more time is to have a chance to perhaps dispel some of the misinformation that's out there. In my discussions with you, I think I misunderstood that you had arranged some special provision from Betty Little for the school, when in fact what we're talking about is legislation that sunsets and is renewed every 2 years, and has been since the 90s.
What I said, if you remember, and as far as the legislation, I was asked by Maureen to contact that office and get it extended.
Well, that's great. As a standard response from a bureaucrat, I can't help you, but the state legislature can extend the program.
Well, baseball, to see that it is done before you move forward.
Right.
And as I also explained, I was not going to come to this committee and say, we may have it, or you will have 95 unless I had something concrete. And that's why I had to get that.
I just wanted to make that point clear.
That's fine. That's fine.
And it'd be interesting to hear an estimation of, the likelihood of that, because I think one thing that I would say is very, very clear is that we are in the very preliminary stages of investigation, and I don't know how options can be chosen without additional information.
Well, I also think, Melissa, what I was trying to do is to offer anyone who wants to get that additional information that this committee has been working on for the past 6 or 7 months. They have had that information. They have been receiving whatever information they needed and have been processing. And that's why I think everybody who wants to, who is serious about this, should actually sign up for this tour, because it will be, I think it will be revealing.
If I could just, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply that you were withholding information that you had. I'm talking about information, for example, cost estimates and building sketches that have been done. In all fairness to the architects, we've been you did a lot of work. That's pretty amazing. But what you have is a list of needs and wants that the architects prepared for you. And what we don't have is the cost of that.
And that's what we're going to on the 30th. It would also help if people did take the tour, so when we do meet on the 30th, they are aware of the existing conditions, so when the architects present the cost and look at the different facilities and, the different options that we're all offering.
There are a few other things, Bob, that you should mention about how much money has been put into these two older schools in the past 5 to 10 years, and how much money that this entire facility and our group and myself has to be put in before you even consider building those additions on. I mean, you have to bring these structures up to code before you even consider putting addition on, and how much is that going to cost, and how much is that going to be funded? I don't want to condemn any building, but we have to weigh.
In 2 weeks.
We have to weigh every option and choose the best for our district.
And I think I did make available to you too, the questions that we addressed last time, and also part of the things on the facilities I made available was each of the buildings and what were some of the recommendations of the things that had to be done and needed to be done in the code. So this is what we're working with. So I'm very pleased to see as many people turn out. I want to keep the communications open. If there's any information, even after this meeting, that you want to call and ask about, I'll try to provide that. I'd be more than happy to share anything that we have talked about in committee. I just think it's a great process. Whatever the decision is,